Don't slap your leg.
AKA Spencer.
Apparently you're getting fines for that now in the WWE.
Leg slaps.
Did you see that?
Good,
That's
good.
like a thing.
They should.
What?
That's what Cornette said.
I swear, I was not yelling. I was having a discussion with one of my students about how unprofessional leg slaps are, and how about, half the problem is that everybody does them now.
It's overdone. That's the problem.
It's so overdone.
That's the problem. Is that
everybody does leg slaps all the time, and it's like, it's also habit. So like half the time, even if you miss, the guys still slap the leg because it's they're in the habit of doing it.
So when you miss it, it's terrible.
And then
you've
like,
got this noise that doesn't.
Yeah. And then like the next day that news hit that like, oh, WWE is fining for leg slaps now. I just wanted to call him and be like, hey Mark, hey, did you see this? Hey, did you see? He knows who he is too. I don't know if he watches, whatever.
I was watching Cornette talk about that. And I know that Cornette's an angry old man and he complains a lot, but I think Cornette's got a lot of very right things to say if you can pick out the things that he's overly critical about.
Oh, for sure.
I think there's a lot of really good learning experiences of what Jim Cornette has to say.
Oh, for sure.
Because even on that particular subject, he was like, look, when the right guy is doing the leg slap, it's awesome. Because if it's undetectable and they're hitting their move solid and it just sounds like they're like knocking you out, that's when it's awesome. The problem is that every indie worker slaps their leg on everything they do now, and it has completely diminished the leg slap.
Yep.
And I agree with him 100% on that. 100% I agree with that. Like, that's got to be one of those, like, special things that you save for a special moment, and you've got to do it good enough that you don't openly see yourself. Like, even The Rock is guilty of the thigh slap. You know what I mean? And The Rock is amazing, but even he's guilty of it.
Yep.
And, like, if you do it in the right moment, at the right time, when you're hitting that right move perfect, it's amazing, and you get that pop from the crowd because it's, oh, you know? But, like, when you're just doing it all the time, even when you're completely whiffing the guy or just throwing, it completely diminishes the leg slap or the thigh slap. You know, it's like it makes it not matter anymore. So I agree with that completely. Oh, we gonna do a thigh slap? No, she doesn't know. I never got into the thigh slapping thing. I never really did it. But I'll tell you what I did always do, and you know, Cornette kind of brought this up too, because he talked about how, you know, especially a lot of the older guys would do the thing where when they threw the punch, they would stomp the mat at the point of impact. And I do that. And really? I've always kind of done that, and it's kind of, you know what? I probably don't do it as much now as I used to, but absolutely when I first started out, it was almost like a natural thing where, like, when I threw my punch, I did the stomp with it, and
so here's my thing. It's so funny you bring that up, because I actually so when we learned together. When I learned, yes, I used to throw the stomp, and I tried to do, I threw my punches when I was young like Bret Hart, and Bret Hart had a different kind of stomp where it was almost like he popped both feet as he threw his body into the punch.
Yeah.
I used to do that. The first time I went to a WWE tryout in OVW, their big thing was no more stomps, break the stomps. And I broke myself of the habit of the stomps, and I've trained with throwing punches without stomps ever since. And it is so funny that you bring that up, because one of my whole points when I was when I was reprimanding this student who was throwing leg slaps for every kick and everything he did, I equated it to the stomps. It's become the new stomp. To where, like...
That's exactly what Cornette said.
Yes, because, you know...
That's exactly what he said.
And because a fan, right? You watch a fan, or, you know, most wrestling fans, what's the one thing they knew that, like, you know, oh, you know it's fake, right? You know they stomp when they punch. I remember hearing that before I was a wrestling fan.
Yeah.
You know, before I was a wrestling fan, I remember hearing that, like, oh, you can see when they throw a punch, they stomp and it makes that noise. And like, I feel like that is the new leg slap. A kick, the same way a punch does not sound like a stomp on the mat, a kick does not sound like a leg slap.
Yeah, exactly.
And I feel like, and although
that's
I
like
haven't,
adding those sound effects in a movie, like in movies when they fight and they add the sound effects.
Yeah.
That stuff doesn't really sound like that when you're in a fight.
For sure.
So it's kind of like that whole thing. Like, do you want it to sound like a movie, or is this supposed to be a real fight?
For sure.
And I guess you have to decide, like, what this is. Like, what wrestling is. And I know it's kind of in the middle of those two things.
Yeah.
But, like, I get it. Like, I totally get why WWE might be going, hey, we're going a little overboard on the slaps. Let's rein it in a little bit.
Everybody leg slaps for every stomp, every kick, every, and a lot of the punches.
I get it. I get it. One of the things, and I hate to just keep like regurgitating Cornette stuff, but like I said, I feel like there's a lot of like real good stuff in there that you can learn from if you can separate from his insanity sometimes. One of the things
which is a big separation.
I know. But one of the things he talked about in there is he kind of correlated to this. He said, one of the things I remember when I was at the WWF that Vince hated is when a guy was working somebody in the corner and he would go to choke the guy in the corner. Vince absolutely hated it when the guy selling the choke would put their hands on the ropes instead of grabbing the guy's hands. Because if you're thinking about it realistically, if somebody is choking you, your instinct would be to grab their hands and stop them from choking you.
Right.
So Vince used to get pissed at guys for doing this when they were getting choked instead of putting their hands on the wrists of the guy choking them. So he kind of like tied these two things together. And he's like, he's like, I can't even completely blame Vince for like making this rule or whatever, because like, I get it. I understand what he's saying and I totally get it. And that makes total sense to me too. And that's the way I was trained, like, you got to think about these things as if you were reacting to it in a real scenario, not necessarily that we're wrestlers and we're working through spots. The whole point of selling is to like sell it as if this stuff is really happening to you. So sometimes you have to think that kind of stuff through and like, how would I be reacting if this was really happening to me? And honestly, I do that. I think the leg slapping kind of ties into that, because it's like a real kick wouldn't sound like that. So a real punch wouldn't sound like that.
The term they always used when I was doing my tryouts and when I was going to WWE clinics, not just indie clinics, the WWE clinics, the term they would use, stupid wrestling bullshit.